The other reason why it's important for students is that today it's hard to create really interesting software. Every once in a while you find some people, like the guys that started Google or something like that they have a spark of an idea and they start to develop something. But typically today, creating interesting software is the project of a group of people, at least. And so by working with free software, you can give students the chance to actually work on a real product that's being used by people as a collaborative group. And this is very, very important to the student's ability to go back out into the job force. If all you ever teach them is how to work individually on a product or projects, then they don't get that chance to interact and realize what the main benefit of working in a collaborative group. Mark Shuttleworth, when he wanted to form Canonical, went down to Antarctica and spent 6 months down there with the entire Debian mailing list on his notebook. He went through the mailing list looking at people's answers to questions and things like that. He looked at the code that they had contributed to the project, and when he came back from that, he pointed to these people and said, I want you and you and you and you to come work with me on this new thing called Canonical. He didn't have to look at people's resumes. He didn't have to guess that people were telling him the right thing. He could see what these people were doing. And so, in effect, free software allows a student to create a portfolio of work that as they graduate, they can show this portfolio. They can say, these are my contributions. These are how I got along with people. This is the code that I wrote. If you work for a closed source proprietary company, a lot of times you're not allowed to show that software. You may have done a great job. You may be able to say, I worked on this product. But when the person who's interviewing you says, what exactly did you do? You can only talk about it. You can't really show them the good code and the good techniques that you used. Now, I've talked about the importance to students. I go to a lot of different countries around the world. In my lifetime, I've been to 100 different countries, most of them more than once. We live in a very unique environment. We live in the United States. We have a lot of companies here who produce software. But to a lot of these companies that are outside of the United States, they have different things to worry about. So, for example, if I am the Chinese general in the Chinese army, I might worry about whether or not the software that I get from Microsoft has any Trojan horses in it. Or is it going to function properly in my environment? Not that we would ever put software in some other country's computer systems that might damage them or anything. We would never do that. Plus, local jobs. I live in there's a lot of people who think of the United States as one large country. But when you go back to the Constitution of the United States, you find out there were actually 50 small countries. I live in the small country of New Hampshire. We make two things in New Hampshire, actually three things. We make cows, we make maple syrup, and we make software. And well, not me, but a lot of the people in New Hampshire send a lot of their money to the small country of Redmond, Washington. And they basically make software. At the same time, we have a whole bunch of software makers in New Hampshire that are out of work. And I have a little bit of problem of sending all of the money from our little country of New Hampshire to Redmond, Washington, because there's only so much maple syrup that Bill Gates can drink. Okay. And he doesn't like cows, okay? I tried sending him cows. He doesn't like those. So that's a problem. And for our balance of trade, what I would like to do is keep as much of that money as possible, paying our programmers in our state to meet our needs with the software. Another importance to a country is to eliminate software piracy. Now software, there's a lot of people, and Richard Stallman's one of them, who doesn't like the word software piracy. He doesn't consider, stealing software. He doesn't think you can steal software. But underneath the laws of our country, yes, you can steal software. It's a law. And if you break the law, you're guilty of it. The problem with software piracy is twofold. Number one, the person who wants to sell their software can't make any money off of it because people are stealing it. But number two, when you steal the software, it devalues it. It takes away the value of the software. And that's a problem because you cannot then justify the business of creating software. Now, Richard Stallman, in all the times that he's run the Free Software Foundation, he has never one time said that you should not be able to make money writing free software. It's just that after you've written the software, it should be free. Free as in freedom. And so there's a slight difference there. In fact, if you go to the website of the Free Software Foundation, you'll find a web page that very specifically says that you should be able to charge for writing software. Software piracy devalues that. And finally, the importance to the country of creating software is a leadership. I was down in Venezuela on a trip, and I saw a whole bunch of college students who were graduating. I asked them, what is your future? What do you want to do? And they said, after graduation, we want to move to either England or Spain. I said, why? You have a very nice country here. You have, it's nice, lots of fruits and everything like that. It's nice temperature, nice climate. You have beautiful women. And to the women, I said, you have beautiful men. And they said, well, the real problem is that we're a Microsoft country. And there's a lot of people that the only jobs we can get is installing Microsoft software. Now, you don't need much of an education to do that. And by the time they charged enough money for what they needed to live, all of their customers would say, why should I pay you so much money just to install this software? I could hire a high school student to do that. And consequently, the value or the perceived value that they were giving of installing and integrating the software was not enough to give them a job where they could earn as much money as they wanted. By going to Spain or England, they could get jobs in programming which were perceived to give enough value, so they not only could pay for their apartment, but they could have enough money left over for things like food and clothing and to take their significant other out on a date. So these are all reasons why free software should be important to a country. Oh, I also forgot about longevity. How long should your software exist? How long do you want your elevators to keep working? How long should your country be able to use its email system? Should that be until the company that produced it decides they're no longer going to create that package of software, or that company goes out of business? You better have a way to be able to reproduce that software when you need it. And that's a problem. It isn't always even up to your control or your country's or your company's control. There is a small country off the coast of Florida. You may have heard of it. It's called Cuba. And we've had an embargo against Cuba for so long that most of us have forgotten even what the embargo was about. Cuba cannot legally use any software from the United States. And even free software, if you go to Red Hat's site, you'll find out that Red Hat can't ship any software or have any dealings with Cuba whatsoever. Novell can't have any dealings with Cuba whatsoever. So how does Cuba use computers? Well, they pirate software from Microsoft. That's one way. The problem with that is that Castro cannot call up Bill Gates to get help with his software. He can't say, hey Bill, you fix my software, I'll give you a box of cigars. because even if Bill Gates wanted to help Castro, he cannot legally do that as a United States citizen. So, naturally, Cuba is leaning towards free software. Not only because they have the right to use it, since free software is developed all over the world, but they have the capability of sustaining it on their own. Now, there was also a person many years ago by the name of John Lyons. John was a professor at the University of New South Wales. And he became familiar with this little operating system called Unix. Remember Unix? It started in 1969. John believed that the best way of teaching students computer science was to show them the software that had been produced by people who were recognized as good programmers. And since Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie were excellent programmers, he wanted to show his students the source code of the Unix kernel at that time to show them how it was written, how it did its work, and most importantly, the style of programming that these people did. So he took the entire source code of the kernel of version 6 Unix, and he commented it. And he wrote another book which was the description of how the code worked. So here was the source code with all of the comments in it, and another volume which was module by module, what the module did, why they chose that particular algorithm. It was in fact a work of art. He was just about to publish this when the licensing of the kernel changed and AT&T would not allow him to publish this work. Now, that would have been the end of it, except he had given out a couple of pre-copies of this to his students. And his students, like you see right here, the students would photocopy it. And then they would give it to their friends, and then they would make photocopies of the photocopies, and then photocopies of the photocopies of the photocopies, and so forth and so on, until it became the most photocopied technical book of all times, and secondly, was the most photocopied book outside of the Bible. And one way that you showed how great a programmer you were, or how long you've been in the business, was how many photocopied generations was your copy. I'm happy to say I have a 3rd generation photocopy that you could pretty much read what's on it. Some people who had 10th generation photocopies, it was very hard to read what was on there. Now, this goes to show that one of the advantages of open source is to be able to show the students exactly how real working code that people really use works.